So today on the Dig podcast, I am speaking to the powerhouse that is Jennifer Rock. And just for anyone who doesn't know, which I'm sure isn't too many, I'm just going to tell you a wee bit about her from what I know about her anyway, but she'll fill us all in on the podcast. Jennifer is the founder of The Skin Nerd, including Nerd Network online skin consultations, Cleanse Off Mitt, and Skingredients. And she is a multi-award-winning Dermal Facialist and Skin Tutor. She's also the best-selling author of The Skin Nerd, your straight-talking guide to feeding, protecting and respecting your skin. She features regularly in the Irish Examiner. You'll see her face on IrelandAM quite a lot. She also regularly features in Image, Irish Country Magazine, The Sunday Business Post, Stellar and Irish Tatler, and on Today FM, 2FM, Spin 103 at Q102 and News Talk. She is everywhere and she's on the Dig podcast. How amazing. I have always wanted to speak to Jennifer and we'll talk about that in the podcast, but I read an article recently that Jennifer had given a quote in and I was like, oh, she has to speak to the Dig podcast audience. She said, the lesson I would like to pass on to others that in life there is always a way. It's not about dreaming about it. Anyone can dream. How true is that? It's about empowering yourself to make it a reality. There is no better person to do it than you.
This is an exciting new digital world we live in, and I want this podcast to help inspire you on your entrepreneurial journey. It's not easy juggling all the balls in the world of work, and I know that more than anyone. But I invite you to join thousands of our other listeners as we talk about all things money, marketing, hard times and successes. So get ready to be challenged and inspired. This is the Dig podcast.
So what a way to introduce you, you amazing person. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, Caroline. Thank you so much for having me, honestly. And that quote, I think, has resonated with many. Through Instagram, you'd have a lot of contact with people, and it's really beautiful to hear how people take that feedback and try to apply it, and that's the hardest thing to do, is to apply it. Sometimes it's very easy to listen to all this information, but it's so much harder to get up, go, start and make harsh decisions at times in terms of business. But generally honoured to be here. I really am. So thank you very much for asking me.
No, and I don't know if you remember, but in 2017 I sent you a message. I was having my first ever business event in my local town in Dungannon, and a few people I said it to thought I was mad. She'll not even write back to you. So I followed you on Snapchat in those days. Are you still on Snapchat?
No, I don't do Snapchat at all anymore. And you'd mentioned that earlier when you were talking about this socially. And so I put up a poll to say, are people still on it? Are people still on Snapchat, or is it Instagram only? So I've left Snapchat. The Snapchat days are behind me, but they're very much what built all that I have today. So hugely appreciative for that platform, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how, but that's where I started to follow you, and I sent you a message, and I think I voice noted you because I always advocate for voice notes. And you voice noted me right back. So you actually couldn't commit at that time but give me the reasons why, which were so valid, and said, but absolutely, let's hope we meet together in the future. So here we are.
It only took 4 years.
Yeah,
but we got there.
It was worth the wait for sure. But I suppose I want to launch straight in, and I gave you the introduction there, but my goodness, where did that all start? How has this all came to be? What was the early days like? What were you doing? How did Jennifer Rock the Skin Nerd happen?
I suppose for those that don't know, my background is a facialist. I'm a skincare tutor and trainer and facialist by profession. And as many people that get into the beauty sector, I also suffered with my own skin and truly felt at times debilitated by it. As a teenager, I was teased, as we often are, unfortunately, at that stage in our life. And so for me, cleansing, and at the time it would have been Cleanse Tone Moisturizers back in the 90s. And it was very much a control piece for me, that I felt I could empower myself, have that structure back and just feel honestly good in my own skin. It became an absolute passion, to the point that I relentlessly said to my parents, you're thinking back to the early 2000s, this wasn't perhaps the sector that we know skincare and beauty to be today, which is $1 billion turning industry. It wasn't maybe the inverted commas chosen path for me by my parents, which I understand now. My son is turning 18 in 8 weeks, and I think, my goodness, all you want is the best for them as you see it to be. So I persevered. I studied to become a beauty therapist. I completely immersed myself in skincare. skincare. And I had I had an amazing experience whereby I taught from many different skincare brands. Some were South African based, some Australian based, some America based, some London based. And through that, then it brought me all across the globe training beauty therapists to either become beauty therapists or within skincare. And you're working, honestly, Caroline, you're working alongside plastic surgeons, dermatologists, nutritionists, dietitians. Your head is just constantly learning and you're absorbing an awful lot of it. Then I decided to settle back in Ireland full time, work for an Irish based brand. And I was fortunate enough to be given an opportunity to do a lot of media. I joined Snapchat, as you referred to earlier, and I still spend a lot of my time dancing around in onesies and educating on all things skin. So it came from a real passion project piece. It was my career and my hobby all rolled into one. The Snapchat element gave me access to tens of thousands of people in a matter of weeks. And I suppose it became a reality that I could see that there was a huge need from an audience perspective, that they felt that they wanted science-based skincare, real honest talking, less marketing, less sensual, less experiential element of skincare, which still stands and I love it. My original background is from a spa, so I would have been very much into the aromatherapy element. It's now transitioned hugely into clinical skincare. I have a cosmetic chemist that works for me. I have an amazing tutor and educational team that work alongside me. So that kind of led to the start of what you called the Nerd Network, which is an online consultation service whereby I want people to be able to come to us in a digital way. They fill out a form, they join and they become a member, but we learn so much about them. They learn so much about their skin. They have a one-to-one tuition session with a nerd who is a qualified facialist for a minimum of 7 to 10 years. So they're hugely involved in skin. And then we teach them what to do, what not to do, and try to cut out all of the noise, all of the marketing, all of the do's and don'ts and trends, and just say, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. And then you have somebody you can come back to. And it's the community that I'm proudest of. So people can come back to us regularly online and say, I saw this online, or I got this as a gift, or I'm slightly intrigued by this. Does this suit my skin? Because skincare is so saturated right now. There's phenomenal brands out there, but there's a lot less education compared to the brands that are available to us. So that was the start of the business side of it, where I set up the Nerd Network. We now have nearly 50,000 clients. They're so active. They keep us on their toes. They challenge us regularly. They're coming with all of the conversations like, where do you stand on sustainability? What's your opinion on this trend living ingredient? Or essentially that's where Skingredients was then born from, listening to our clients day in, day out say, I want something simplistic, affordable, results driven and education based, and et voila, well, not quite as easy as that, but et voila, 7 products later we launched with Skingredients just over 2 years ago now, and really proud to say it's in 300 doors across Ireland, and we just launched on Cult Beauty in the UK there 2 weeks ago. So it's all starting to gain traction and hopefully going the right way. So
wow, like you just said 50,000 clients, like as if it, I'm not under any illusions that you don't think that it's big, but I mean 50,000 clients.
It's an immense responsibility, because you're essentially being trusted by these amount of humans, or humans as we would say, which means humans. So for me, skincare isn't specific to a particular gender or a particular age or a particular price bracket. And not to try and make this sound in any way insincere, but skincare should be for everybody, and the skin is an organ. And I suppose for me, it's trying to educate people how to look after their skin in a simplistic manner every morning, every evening. But going back to why I started skincare, it is actually to empower you to feel better in yourself. We see huge links between how people feel about their skin and then how they feel about themselves, the confidence, the self-esteem issues. So for me, skincare is an emotive piece as much as it is an aesthetic piece. And I think that thread through all that we do draws an awful lot of people in that just want real, honest, educational advice on skincare. So it's been a roller coaster, I'm not going to lie, but proud of where we are. There's no denying that.
Absolutely. And like I was reading some online articles before our interview today, and it wasn't easy at the start, like in the early days. Tell me a wee bit about that, like, because there's so many people listening that it's real life to have challenges like the ones you've had thrown at you, but sometimes people don't talk about that, especially in business. It's like you just see the glam and the easy, but like it wasn't easy. Sure, it wasn't.
100%. And I would argue to say in the most respectful way, it still isn't. And that's the joy of social media, is that it allows you to connect directly with your audience, with your clients, with your peers. But a lot of the time, as we all do, we showcase the best versions, the highlights, etc. But no, to rewind to how it truly started, I was sitting in a clinic in London at the time. I don't know if you've ever had your face scanned with, it looks like an old school television. You place your face into it, it scans your skin, it teaches you all that you need to know. But ultimately at that time, clients were spending copious amount of money on the likes of serums, eye creams, tweakments, etc. And they just weren't cleansing properly. So I felt that there was a need to create a tool or an accessory that rivaled. Wipes were huge at that stage. And it wasn't even the eco element, if I'm being completely frank, that drove it. It was the fact that wipes just don't serve any true benefit to your skin. So I created what is now known as the Cleanse Off Mitt, and decided that was it. I'm going to create a mitt that would be affordable. There were others in the sector, don't pretend to be the first to create this, but they were probably 4 to 5 times the price point that I really wanted to gear this towards. And I researched relentlessly. At the start of any business, you don't truly know where to go, how to start. There's a self-taught element to it all. There's perhaps a naivety and a sheer determination that drives you through. Cleanse Off Mitt launched, goodness, it must be 7 years ago now at least. I'm terrible with timelines. And it launched and I thought, this is brilliant. There was great traction. We had huge support across all of Ireland, media, journalists, end users. But unfortunately, I didn't have my contracts in place, and it just led to not a great situation whereby 20,000 units had just landed into Dublin Port. The distributor at the time I hadn't signed a contract with, I didn't have any legal advice, and he decided, which you have to respect, business is business. He said, I'm going to do this myself. So that order of 20,000 just vanished in the space of an email. And I genuinely have goosebumps. This story still, I suppose, look, you know what, that story has taught me so much now that I'm a far different person in business. But we had used, at the time, I'd been saving for a house with my son, saving my partner for my house for the 3 of us, and I had used all of our life savings for the house to use it into the business, and it was just, everything came crumbling around me. So tail between legs, put mitts in every single building possible, and quite hurt, ego bruised, disappointed, went back to working for other companies as if they were my own. That's always how I've been, just adore what I do, would have quite a strong work ethic in that sense. And it was only when, as I mentioned earlier, that I started the media side of skincare, when I eventually came back to Ireland full time, that I realized people were really listening. They were really intrigued. And my parents, this is genuinely the absolute truth, I kid you not, my parents had thousands of mitts in my old bedroom, my brother's old bedroom, upstairs in the attic. The house was about to implode. There was just mitts everywhere. And they said to me, could you perhaps, maybe mention the mitt online, rather than always talking about everyone else's brand? And it wasn't a calculated decision. There was no business plan. It was just, of course, they want their old bedroom back. They wanted to redecorate. I'd moved out, 15 years at this stage. They were allowed to do what they wanted to the house. And they decided that, look, we'll help. They had just retired, and I mentioned it on Snapchat, and it was just, all of a sudden, people were really interested in it. We sold 10,000 units in about 10 days. My parents were picking and packing from the dining room table. Everything was done by hand on a notepad. My mum writes shorthand. It was just bananas when I think back. My son was cycling up and down to An Post, delivering the mitts, negotiating commission with me, Caroline, so that child will be fine in life.
Well.
But that was the start of Cleanse Off Mitt, and that really then did teach me, as I said, getting contracts in place, try to see it like a business. Yes, it's your passion, but you need to really respect what you're doing and the relationships you have with other businesses. And so that is ultimately the platform that allowed Skin Nerd Network, as I said, to come through. It then ensured that I had a lot of knowledge and insight when I launched Skingredients, that I had an understanding of the trade and how do pharmacies work and all of the elements of business that people tend not to talk about. But it definitely gave me a fast track reality as to how to do it. But it wouldn't have happened without social media. That's the really interesting part for me. I wouldn't have had access to so many people for them to learn about this product that is the Cleanse Off Mitt. If anyone doesn't know, it literally just takes your makeup off in seconds. It's a beautiful tool to use alongside cleansers, or if you're absolutely shattered on a Friday night and the thought of cleansing is the last thing from your mind, you pop your hand into it, you wet the product, and it takes off anything that's on your face within seconds. So yeah, ultimately that was kind of the introduction. And you say it wasn't easy. It wasn't. My parents were driving up and down to local storage units, packing them. They knew the couriers of the area. It became too much for them, to be honest. The support that we'd had, the amount that we were thankfully selling at the time, they couldn't do it. They weren't built for it. They had decided to retire, not to set up a business with me. I was working full time for an amazing company at the time. And I used to come home, 6 or 7 at night. Matthew go to bed, my son, and then I'd stay up for 3, 4, 5 hours trying to run the back of the business. And I suppose the traction that we had, I felt it was a now or never. And seeing my parents struggle, to be honest, with the amount that we were having to do, I realized I had to actually leave the full-time job and try, because if you don't try, I could be sitting here now wondering what if. So thankfully, with a lot of support and a lot of learnings, I set it up as an official business, and we're still growing to this day. So in this situation, it's been a hugely successful piece in that regard.
The Dig podcast is all about educating my listeners, but it's so important to me that it is also a place to gain exposure. Each week, we open up the podcast to brands and business owners to pitch to you guys. I can't wait for you to hear from this week's business.
Empowering women to be women of power. Evolve is an educational platform that supports and encourages women to unleash their full potential, achieve success and reach their goals and dreams. You can find us on all social media platforms and on our website www.evolvewomen.org. The founding principle behind Evolve is to create an equal world. Our Evolve platform creates awareness of the inequalities and gender stereotypes that still exist, and it showcases the benefits of true equality by appreciating each other's worth and contribution. We published our first book, Evolve, Voices of Leadership, in November 2021, available to buy on kmdbooks.com and amazon.co.uk. The inspiration for Voices of Leadership came from our growing Evolve community, the remarkable women we have met and the stories they had to share. This book is not only a celebration of 16 unique leaders across different industries, but a glimpse into what is possible by elevating and expanding on their unique leadership styles. These remarkable leaders have pushed boundaries, taken risks, and challenged convention with courage and conviction to bring their vision to life and achieve their dreams. We would love to invite you to join our growing Evolve community by visiting www.evolvewomen.org.
So, to bring it back to what I said, when I was watching all of that, no clue. I just seen this amazing product being launched. I didn't actually know that behind the scenes stories, but for you to be able to tell that now is going to help so many people. I be out and about with businesses and they're in the dire straits because things like this has happened, and they feel like they're the only one. I can't believe, they feel like a failure. But for them to hear that from you, it's going to be like, oh, I hope it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And yeah, I guess it's just inspiring to hear you be so open about that journey, because you don't know at the start. You learn as you go, right?
And Caroline, I think the hard part is, whether you have children or not, but I'll put myself into the bracket of being a mother, that you feel you always have to compromise. Where are you at what stage, and what are you prioritizing at that minute, at that moment, at that day? And I often felt, am I doing this right? I'm working so many hours. People talk about, reading the book 4-hour week, and how do you optimize and prioritize? And I just still to this day still can't see how I keep it within a 39.5 hour bracket. And it's a tough one. So you're always, unfortunately, still challenging yourself, querying yourself, learning from others. And I think if you have a plan and you have the right people around you, friends, peers, mentors, I'm shamelessly message people and say, could you please be my mentor? Have you got an hour? And I'm really fortunate that people have been really so giving of their time, that all of those snippets have allowed you to say, right, I think I'm doing this right. Let me tweak it. Let me change it. But it's hard. It's definitely hard. But if you love what you do, and that sounds like such a cliche, if you love what you do, it's not that you never work a day in your life. I don't believe that. But if you love what you do, it does make the working really hard an awful lot easier. And I think that's something that is our responsibility to talk about. When I look at Matthew now, doing his leaving cert, and I think about that whole generation, he has no concept of money. He thinks social media is just easy. It's trying to teach people that hard graft is still the reality. Life hasn't changed that much in 2 decades. Social media might have opened up doors, but it doesn't mean that it's nowhere. It's still hard. It's still a lot of graft.
Absolutely. And I know we haven't written it down in our notes, but you've just said something there, and I guess I think businesses will maybe not be even opening their mind to this about the mentoring. Like lots of businesses just are solo, like they're flying solo. They don't realize if they just reach out to ask someone in a position that knows that their problems could be solved like that with one piece of advice. So like you said, to do that, but like literally just send a message, like lift the phone. That's how easy it is.
I think the word networking is a word that people have a dislike of, and for me the word networking it's huge. So when I say networking, I mean going to events, or often you're invited to attend things, or go to different seminars and panelists and so on, and you think, oh my goodness, I have to do X, Y and Z. But I really forced myself to attend those. It did mean working later in the evening once you got home, but constantly surrounding myself with people that I found to be inspiring. And often it's those that you might not have heard of, or in a totally different sector to you. And yes, back to your question, asking them at the end, being cheeky enough, and all people can say is no, and you have to respect that. But I think when people see that there's a drive and a determination in you and an interest, if they're in the right place in their career. So for example, I would have had people of late ask, can I mentor? And I'm 4 years in business with Nerd Network, 2 years with Skingredients. I don't feel I'm quite at the stage that I have an awful lot to pass on just yet. And time-wise, as I said, hours-wise, it's not always there. So what I'm trying to say is I'll see people that have either sold their business, have recruited CEOs, so they're essentially in this stage or phase whereby they have slightly more time to give to others. And you usually find, because they've done the same road, that they actually want to help people. So it's finding people at the right time of their career, I think, is key.
Absolutely. Oh my God, that's so good. It said there's a lot of people going to be
everybody
more vocal about needing some advice, and some, because like nobody knows to the know, and you just need to find out who knows, is really the way I look at it. But so I've written here, like, what advice would you give to someone to launch their own product? But I guess you've already covered that, in the legalities is so important, right?
Legalities, definitely not shying away from the fact that it is a business. For example, there's 30 employees now, and I have a responsibility to make sure that they have their funds at the end of the month. And not only that we create products that truly are results driven. So I need to have funds to put back in to develop those products further. So I think it's being aware that it's okay to see it as a business. It's not that you have to shy away from that reality of accounts, legalities, companies, and how do you set them up. And you definitely need a good solicitor, you need a good accountant, and those people come. But it's about trying to, again, align yourself with other business owners and say, who do you use? How did you find them? Where did you go for trademarks versus how did you do for contract negotiation? And it's eye opening the more that you can learn from others. And honestly, podcasts like this, you're hearing other people and taking one piece from it is all that is often needed.
Absolutely. And we do show notes, as yours will be turned into show notes after this, so people can, they're out walking, running, driving, they can actually go back to the website and get all the links and the good stuff. So so I've written here you were ahead of the game when it came to online consultations. Like, you did that when people were like, what the hell is she doing, right?
Nobody believes that Nerd Network was going to work, and that's not a lie. I remember, back to the Snapchat piece, I would reply back for hours on end. Sunday was my dedicated day because at that stage I was working full time. So I used to allow the messages to build, and this is at a stage when Snapchat and social media was really building. So the interaction was just so high, and you would have no dramatization, hundreds, if not into the thousands of messages. So it would take a long time to get back to people. And typically what would happen is I do a Q&A on a Sunday, and people would send in messages, what should I do? What should I use? This is my skin situation. And I'd reply back saying, did you think of using vitamin A? Did you think of using hyaluronic? Oh, that perhaps isn't best for you right now. It's just going to cause more irritation, whatever the case might be. And I started to really realize then when those same people come back 3, 6, 9 months later and they're saying, the difference in my skin is unbelievable. And I was like, if this is just from a Snapchat message, imagine if I could do it where it's a video conference call. There's an entire, a whole piece on somebody's past collated. So your budget, how your skin is, what your diet is, all of the things that we know truly makes an impact on skin. Imagine if I did it in a controlled environment whereby we set up an active community and people could learn from each other. And when I positioned this and said this to friends and family, they looked at me like I had 25 heads, not even 10. They're like, Jennifer, but everyone, you have to touch skin and you have to see people. And, people are used to pharmacies and department stores and salons, and that's your background. So why would you do something so different? And my only answer, which was based on no data, which I've since learned, is please don't take that as advice. I will say this advice. you have to go with data always, but there's something about intuition when you're so immersed in your topic that you can see a gap. And for me, I could see an apparent gap through living with Snapchat. I was like, I've changed people's skin. They feel better in themselves. So I feel there's something here. Feelings have now changed into you actually do need concrete evidence. But thankfully, again, it was the right time, right place. People really supported it. And as I said, we're nearly 50,000 clients later. People are just so proactive, they challenge us constantly. They're constantly interacting with us. So we were ahead of the game in many a way, but at some stage that actually works against you because you're constantly trying to position yourself, explain yourself, and re-educate people that actually, if you fill in your form carefully, if you send us the correct photographs, and if you truly use that video consultation time with your skin nerd, or we would call them like a personal trainer for your skin, it's really about teaching you how to look after your own skin. So yes, the dream would be to touch, but you can tell an awful lot from what people are doing or not doing, what ingredients they're using or not using. And I look, you know what, the proof's in the pudding. The photographs and the people that are still with us years later shows that you actually can truly do it online. It doesn't always have to be in the traditional face-to-face environment people might associate with skincare.
But like, so when COVID hit, you were like, we're ready. We've already done this. Like, that's amazing. Obviously, I'm saying that lightly, but I mean, I'm not saying that lightly. I'm saying that we all had to then embrace this new digital way of selling whenever COVID hit, like, because we couldn't get out. But you were on there already, which is like, just shows how forward thinking you are. So I'd be very inspired by that. I think that's amazing. And then Skingredients, how did that evolve even further then? Like, if you can talk me through a bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. So Nerd Network was, as you said, digital. So you're constantly having meetings at the end of the week, and you know the nerds are all around saying this client is asking this, or I'm seeing frequently asked questions, or the theme is, or the question is, or people are so unsure about marketing. And so you started to hear the same piece repeatedly, and you realize that actually, because we have, it's now 70 brands on the store, so people can purchase from us or they can purchase elsewhere. We'll support it. The point is the community piece. But you started to realize, as with any facialist, you're like, well, I wish I could take a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So I would like to have simplistic. So for anyone that doesn't know Skingredients, it's a very colorful brand. It's literally labeled into key 4. So it's step 1, cleansing, step 2, hydrate serum, step 3, pro-aging, we say, as opposed to anti-aging serum, and step 4 is your SPF. And there are other products, but essentially this is the key. This is what we call the dinner plate analogy. So just to give a whistle-stop tour as to what I mean, I've always trained, no matter what brand I work for, I've always said skincare doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be sexy per se, but it should actually cause an impact on your skin where you feel better after using it. Not just in the moment while you're cleansing or applying the product, but there are skincare is science, and I think we're often forgiven for thinking that it's just a pretty part at the end of the day, but actually you should see a difference in your hydration. Redness should reduce, pigment should be decreased, lines and wrinkles will never go, but they can be slightly lessened. So essentially that's what Skingredients was. It was an amalgamation of listening through the media, through all the different pieces that I was doing publicly, and then our clients saying, we just want 1, 2, 3, 4, tell us how to use it. And then if anyone has seen the products, you'll see on the back of the product example, we'll have things like use from the nipples up, or you know, how to use your eye makeup, or cleanse for 60 seconds. So it's so educational on the back, so that people almost feel as not quite that there's a skin therapist with you, but that you're really taught how to use the product. So that's how Skingredients came into fruition. It came from truly listening, simplifying it, drowning out the noise. The hardest part came trying to find manufacturers, and again, a whole new world to me. It wasn't something I'd ever done before to this level, trying to create formulas, EU compliance, legalities. Yeah, definitely an interesting one when you start looking at componentry and how do you move products across the world, how do you get them in on time, how do you talk to distributors. You know, there was an awful lot of learning in those few years. And
is that, sorry to jump in, is that something that you would have got help from, like, you know, we call it Invest NI or Trade Ireland, or, you know, how did you actually get that knowledge? Was it mentors, or how did people find out this stuff?
Yeah, great question. I think it was good old Google at the start, where you start to find the trade shows. Where should I go? Where should I be? So it started years and years before Skingredients became a physical entity. But it is about going to the right trade shows and observing, learning, immersing yourself. Then back to the mentor piece. It's not that I'd mentors per se, but I would say, look, you've created a product. Can I ask you, where did you go for legal advice? How do I know that I'm making a product that's EU compliant? And then interviewing the different manufacturers. So when I created Skingredients, so it's essentially the active ingredients, they're not the norm in skincare. They're becoming the norm. Skincare up until maybe 5 years ago was very much centered around hydrating, locking in moisture. It's more like the scent, the aroma element. So trying to find a manufacturer that would actually use vitamin A that can have clinical data behind it to say that it will help the health of your skin, or having an SPF that truly shields the skin against blue light as well as your sunlight, so your computer light, they weren't the norm. So that was the hardest part, trying to find the right manufacturer. And then I also had an independent cosmetic chemist work with me to ensure that I wasn't just being brought down a garden path of different manufacturers where they chose the ingredients and they chose the raw suppliers. I had somebody completely independent who would advise and say, okay, Jennifer, from a facialist perspective, you want probiotics in your cleanser, for example. You want hyaluronic acid in your skin veg, which is our hydrating serum. But then I had a cosmetic chemist say, right, well, that means you need to have it at this molecular weight and this molecular. So they would talk about the penetration, the delivery system, which as a facialist is not my forte. That's their forte. So again, back to that piece of finding people that will kind of support you on what you're trying to do, and then collaboratively you create a product that has the science and the data, has the community and the facialist piece at the heart of it, and it's the right manufacturer to ensure that it's the right level to keep getting the results for people. So it always that's why we say human so much. It always comes down to humans and who you can lean on, who you can trust, and who's going to deliver the best possible product for you. And knocking on lots of doors and not tying yourself to timelines, I think, is important. I had no set, we must launch by this date in mind. It was going to take however long it took to get the right people to do it in the right way, and thankfully that's what stood the test of time. So 2 and a bit years later, our retention rate is like beyond proud of it. The amount of people that keep coming back and have been here from day one because they see a difference in their skin. That's when I always said, people celebrate at the launch, and I remember saying, I won't celebrate this till a year and a half later. And I remember thinking, people were thinking I was quite down on myself, and why isn't she celebrating? Because like, it wasn't that I was celebrating, but to me, it wasn't going to be deemed successful until Caroline O'Neill is getting Skin Veg a year later and a year later. And that's because I know that it's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with anything that I say or how I educate you. You're seeing the difference in your skin. And that's when I believe this year it was really a celebratory piece for us. 2 years in, our retention rate is so high. That's the proud moment, I think.
Well, I think that just shows you're not just about the product, you're about the community. As you said at the start, it's about your people getting what they need from you. So that's exactly why we have people like you on the podcast. But you have a big companies there, like that's a lot of staff, a lot of work. How do you delegate and manage all of this, Jennifer? Like, is your head not buzzing all the time?
I have a busy brain, there's no denying it, and I know everyone must say this, but I really have found, I think when you start to align as a company and know what you want and what you don't want, you start to, like anything in life, like any relationship, be it platonic, be it romantic, it's the same in a professional capacity. So I'm very aware of who we are, and what we stand for. So typically the people that then come to apply for jobs and that we then recruit are people that are very like-minded. So they tend to be what we like to call entrepreneurs. So they're very dedicated to their topic within the company. So my IT gentleman, or my analytics, or my head of logistics, or my warehouse, or my customer service have all come from living that in the past and have wanted to come to a smaller company, which is what we are compared to the conglomerates, and they really wanted someone that had a why, had a purpose, had more than just a 9 to 5, I've done my job. We are beyond passionate in each of our sectors, and that's quite infectious. Slightly dangerous because you have to tell people to clock off, but I think again, I know I'm a broken record, but I really do believe it's about getting the right people around you. But you can't get the right people around you, I believe anyway, in my experience, until you truly know who you are, what you stand for, what's your purpose, what's your why, and where you're headed. And if everyone's on the same mission and we're all going the same way, then it tends to make it a far more enjoyable journey to get there. That's my experience.
Love it. And I suppose we'll all go through bumps in the road when it comes to staff and delegation and all of that. But if you keep that at the forefront of everything you do, it guides you for sure, and you don't step away from your true values. But we talked about social media throughout, how important it's been. I am a great advocate of the positive things it can do for you as a person and a business. I know there's negatives, but there's negatives with everything, but I'll always promote the positives. And I think by the sounds of you do as well. But have you any tips for anyone that's trying to build their brand on social? Because it's not easy. You and I are both good storytellers, and we like to talk, and we don't shy away from the camera, but loads of people struggle. So is there any tips for them? Any words of advice?
From a social media perspective, I suppose, because everything for me was born from social media, for me, what's the most important is that there's a human there. So, and I'm fortunate enough that in skincare, you can associate a human with skincare. If you're coming from tech, or if you're coming from even being an artist, there's many different sectors that it mightn't necessarily feel the natural progression to do so. But I do feel that by us putting our faces out there, so it's myself and my team are on social now, that human piece allows the customer to connect. And back to what you said earlier, Caroline, something I believe in, and this might not be relevant to everybody, but I have my own social media page where I'm showing the juggle of trying to have, like, I'm a single parent, 18-year-old son, trying to get him through school, getting the dinners, bring him to soccer, juggle the business. And I think people like that because we're not trying to show perfection. We show the ups, we show the, not necessarily downs, but definitely show how it's harder to have the ups all of the time. And I think this is the cheesiest answer, and I need to perhaps rephrase it, but it is about finding out what do you want to do? Why do you want to be on social media? Is there a need? Is your demographic there? What do they align with? So do they want to see your finished work? Do they want to see behind the scenes of it? So understanding why you're there, I think, is important. There's a huge social media responsibility that businesses feel, I have to, have X amount of followers, and I have to, and you really don't. So for me, what I've learned of late is that it's less about growing the numbers, but more about the interaction, the DMs, the constant contact. And that means, back to that word community, that we're really building it. And it's in a peer-to-peer and a B2B, so B2B and a B2C place. What I mean by that is we would align with a lot of our stockists, and we would create content for them so that they can pass it on. My advice, I suppose, if I was to simplify or summarize what it is I'm saying, is ask yourself why you're there. What can you create that others can't? And what are you proud to put out there? And how real are you happy to be with yourself? Do you want to show perfection, or do you want to show a little bit of reality? And my learning of late from listening to people constantly, and even brands I choose to follow, are the ones that show when they're learning constantly. So I think the why, and it sounds so simple to do, but it's actually the hardest question to ask yourself. Why are you there, and what will you bring?
Yeah, I love that. It's a hard, like I openly say to businesses, this is not easy, like, especially if it doesn't come naturally to you. But I guess you can get your why across in lots of ways. Sometimes it doesn't have to be the vocal, it can be the action you do, and you show that in social. And I think businesses just need to try and find their way, like you said, that aligns with their values. But by no means is it easy. I always say it's definitely
trial and error, and look at it at the end of the month and see, that post did quite well, or that reel did better, or people. So you start to gauge. And social media, as we know, it's different now than it was a week ago to 2 weeks ago, and there's a fatigue element, and people are obviously constantly absorbing information, but they want to in a different way constantly. So I think it's constantly changing and molding, and you have to stay with that. Doesn't mean you need to be the first to do things, but I think being aware of the trends that are happening around you. And if I may dare to say, enjoy it. If you enjoy anything, it's infectious. I always describe it like a bride and a groom, or a bride and a bride, and a groom and a groom. You see them at the wedding. If they're having a great time, you want to have a great time. If I'm on social media and I feel this brand is putting out content for the sake of it to sell to me, I, as a consumer, I'm slightly turned off. If I feel that they're there for a larger purpose, they're trying to educate, or they're trying to show elements of their business, or the reality, or the USP, and if you can see that they're having fun with it at times, social media is a place where people go to socialize. So trying to align that with your business if it fits.
Absolutely. Oh my God, the people just will see the light after you heard that. So Jennifer, I know you're so busy. I don't want you to be here. I know you have so many meetings and all, but I just want to say that from a female entrepreneur point of view, you are an inspiration, but you're also a nice person. so that helps. That, I'm sorry, like, sometimes people forget to be nice, and this isn't about being nice on this business podcast isn't about searching people's souls, but absolutely we're still people that are humans, as you say, that actually deserve compassion and respect, and you show all of those things. I think that's, from my perspective, why you stand out in your field. That so thank you for being a nice person, as well as an amazing entrepreneur that we can all be inspired by. And if people want to continue to follow you now, how do they do that? Can you tell us?
Yeah, of course. So on social media, back to your last question, we're on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all of the norm at Skingredients. So it's essentially skin and ingredients merged together as one word, or they can look up the Skin Nerd, which is lots of different brands, a whole collection and a wealth of information and education. So either of those, you'll find similarities between the two, but in essence, it's always about education. And as you said, being human. So we reply back as if you are a human. We don't reply back with any agenda. It's just keeping it real, keeping it honest, and trying. For example, I did IrelandAM this morning. I do it every month. It's on Virgin Media, and we had a lady onto my customer service manager for 20 odd minutes talking about, you know, how much she loved this segment. And so there is a real community piece. If you like human, real education and are intrigued in skincare, yeah, absolutely do follow.
And then also Jennifer Rock page, I like to follow it too and see all the fun stuff you're doing behind the scenes, right?
Cleaning my son's carpet, getting protein milk out, driving him to soccer because he plays at quite a high level. That's the reality. If you want the marigolds on and the less sexiness, you're more than welcome to follow Jennifer Rock as well, of course.
Absolutely, and we can't wait to continue to follow that journey. My goodness, what are you going to tell us when you're back on the podcast in like 5 years' time? I didn't put that in my notes, but what is the goals?
So the UK, as I said, with Skingredients has just launched. So by Cult Beauty taking us on, it's a huge seal of approval for those in the UK that may or may not know us yet. And so the UK is definitely a market that I want to attempt to immerse myself in as best as possible. And that's the daunting part, because you're essentially in a new market, starting yourself all over again. So it's back to all of the tips I just said out loud. I have to now apply in a new sector altogether. So hopefully in 5 years' time, I'm saying that the UK is again a similar retention model, and perhaps at that stage we're segueing into other markets. So yeah, there's lots of newness to come. We're quite a slow business, and I mean that in a complimentary sense. I don't just bring product out or new products brought onto Nerd Network for the sake of it. We tend to take our time. Everything is teased and thought out properly. So I think in 5 years' time, if I can still have what we have in Ireland and have grown it abroad, then we're doing something right, which I believe we will.
But don't forget about us here.
100%.
You better come on again and tell us. I can't wait to follow it all. And thank you so much for joining us today on the Dig podcast.
Pleasure, Caroline. Thank you so much for all you do. I think it's inspiring to have a place like this to come to listen and learn from others. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another week of the Dig podcast. If you missed anything, we've made some show notes for you with all the links and all the good stuff we've talked about today. Remember, if you do listen to an episode, screenshot it and share it on social. Remember to tag me so that I see it and I can reshare on my platform. I love to see everyone tuning in each week. It has been an honour to be your host. I look forward to our next episode.